First off, actually, I probably should, just for the record, get a little background on you. If you want to give a short introduction, your current role, any teaching applications, any sort of experiences or what you teach as well. Go ahead.
Kelly Schellenberg. I serve as the Executive Dean for Innovation and Technology at Portland Community College. I've been in that role for about a year, but I've had about 27 years of experience in higher education, primarily through administration and mostly focused with distance education, online learning, and academic technology. I also serve as a faculty member for the Instructional Technology Council's annual Distance Learning Leadership Academy. Primarily, I focus my teaching there around strength-based leadership and strategic direction.
Shelley Kurland, and my job title is Dean of Virtual Campus at the County College of Morris. I set the expectations. We do training. I do a lot of work with third party, with vendors. So we kind of communicate really across the board.
Brittany Hochstetter, and I am a senior professor of communication at Wake Tech Community College in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I've been there for 15 years plus, and a few other colleges along the way as an adjunct instructor and temporary instructor before that. I've also been an administrative department chair, associate department chair, online lead, here and there. Motherhood is full time, and so that has been something that I've enjoyed having in my life, and being a working mom and educator at the same time.
How do you build authenticity to your audience?
I want to make sure that folks feel that they can share themselves more authentically. So I know that I drive all of my technical writer friends nuts because I use way too many exclamation points. And over the years, I've learned it's like, write out what I'm thinking and then go back in and remove half of the exclamation points. Maybe reduce some of the adjectives and adverbs. But I also feel that's who I am. I'm a very descriptive person. I really want to make sure that there's often with especially with communication that's written, people can read into the tone of the message. It's very, very true. So I make sure that I make it overly easy to say, I'm happy now. Let me tell you that I'm happy by including more flowery words. I'm frustrated right now. Let me over communicate. So I think in doing a combination of just kind of being my authentic self and how I write, I also then try to match that by having a balance of just in time spontaneous videos where people can see, oh my gosh, this matches. So I'm seeing in my writing and communication what I'm also seeing in videos.
Whenever I do messaging, it's something I truly believe in, right? So it's something that I'm not just saying to say, and then I'm not just putting a plug in for someone, right? So for me, I think a lot of the authenticity for me that comes through is, I think even the way you word things, or even the images that you select, it reflects who you are, right? So I tend to be pretty warm, and then so then I tend to, like, my words are always more positive, right? So it's always on that positive spin. And then for me, the authenticity in terms of the image, it has to really resonate with me, so that's kind of how, like, for me, it's so hard to explain, but it's really just that, like, I trust my gut in saying, this isn't quite right. This isn't quite you. So it's really just, it really has to, like, I have to believe in the message and believe in the lesson, and then making sure my words match the message that I'm trying to get out. So I think it's just really staying true to who I am.
I think it's okay to lean into your emotions when you're leading or teaching. It's not something that we did as much years and years ago in teaching and leading, but I think we're more open to that now. So that's how I try to approach it, is how are my students feeling right now? How can I support their feelings and support their goals. And how are the faculty feeling right now? And how can I support them? So that humor, empathy, and vulnerability. I'm not afraid to admit if I made a mistake. I'm not afraid to say, this is who I am, and this is what I'm into. These are my hobbies, and this is what I'll be doing this weekend. And I try to open myself up to who they are, let them know who I am.
Do you feel you have a digital identity or a persona kind of in your communication? And how much of that do you put out there? Do you have like different levels to it based on the type of communication, or even professionally? How much of your personal identity do you put out there in the workplace for your audience?
My core values is just the kindness, right? So the kindness to people, and the kindness kind of extends to, grace for you, for others, and all of that. Then the other one is remaining humble, right? So those are two core values that regardless of what I do, really checks me in everything I do, in the communications I give. So that's pretty much out there, and because it extends, because with kindness and humbleness, it helps to, be inclusive. It helps to extend understanding. It helps to remember their different perspectives. So, and then it's also to, to help people hopefully resolve some misunderstandings. So I'm hoping that, and I don't hide from that. It, like, very often I'll just say it outright. So the digital piece is that, like, the messaging always express those two core values to some extent. Like, whether, like, again, I talk about inclusivity, and then for me, the humbleness comes in where, like, I don't know everything. So there's always an invitation for others to join in. So I think that's pretty apparent, in terms of, what we select to be put out in the digital world, for work wise, because I really truly believe in those two, because I think we can work better with each other when we have kindness, and then we remain humble. Like, so I truly believe in that, and I really don't hide that in the things that we do.
How much of your personal self do you feel you put in some of your communications? Now, probably doesn't apply as much to like something if you're addressing the entire faculty or your entire department, but when you're having one-on-ones with your team or, other individuals, where do you feel that informality or that personal touch has a line, if there is one?
That's a really great question. And I think for me, because I'm a pretty authentic person, that I kind of am who I am, I come as I am, that I feel very comfortable. But that's also, again, experience, and I also am very fortunate that I've had years of establishing relationships with many of the people who I work with, so that, like, it can be a trap sometimes, that you feel like, oh, I know this person really well. I can send something really quickly, whether it's an email, whether it's, a content update, because you feel like you know your students really well, and you just don't pay attention. And oops, all of a sudden you come across a little too informal. You may unintentionally come across as disorganized, or, just being too quick. But I think that one of the things that's really important for me is that's part of who I am. I feel like I share my personality without being too personal, right?
Okay.
And so that's my comfort level, is saying, like, this is who I am. I'm happy to share kind of my strengths and my approach and how my style. I feel like I'm pretty open to also, hearing feedback as well, like how's that hitting with people? Do I need to make any changes and modifications? But I also think about, like, hey, if people want to know about, personal information about me, I'm happy to share it. But I don't usually like try to overly share that, because that can also be like, we're talking about work, or we're talking about, organizational psychology. Like, this doesn't quite seem to match. So you always have to make sure you're clear on those boundaries.
I try to be pretty much me in every context. I try very hard to be who I am in every context. I try to be very consistent. You know, obviously there's some things I can't share all the time with them, but even my students know I've got 2 crazy kids and I've got 2 crazy cats, and they know, you know, some basic things about me, and I don't try to be a person who's ashamed of who I am or ashamed of my mistakes or hide anything about me. I am an extrovert, so that comes a little bit easier. I lead and I teach from a very personable place. There are some things, because we have a very diverse audience in a community college, and so there's some things that, especially when I was teaching public speaking, there's some things that we can't share everything about our lives all the time, but that my public self and my private self, I try to share as much as I can that I think is useful to them trusting me and connecting with what I'm trying to accomplish.
In terms of your messaging, we realize, you know, and no one's going to read any email that you have to scroll more than like half a second on. How do you keep your messaging concise? Is it about the wording? Is it about the modality? Do you prefer more short messages? You know, how do you approach that to get something bite-sized if you do that?
I mean, again, for me, I tend to be the person who I'll initially write my thoughts out completely.
Mhm.
And then I will just go through and say, okay, what is all the content I need to remove? And it's interesting. I think that there's, you know, as you're interviewing different people, you'll hear different philosophies. I'm sure people are hearing them going, oh my gosh, that takes so much time. And it's like, true. And if you know folks are only going to be reading your email for 10 seconds, it might seem odd to take 10 minutes to make sure you get it exactly right. And I don't think I take that long, but I do think that taking the 10 minutes to have a clear and concise message that's not misinterpreted is so much more valuable in the long run than potentially, oh my gosh, you know, I didn't read all of the context because I had to scroll 3 times. I didn't catch the key message. Then I missed something important. It ends up costing folks way more than it takes originally. So for me, I have found that that's my sweet spot, which is just write the message, make sure you go through and edit it, make sure it's exactly what you say, and then send it.
Like, that's really hard, especially when you come to emails,
Mhm.
right? You know, so when you do messaging on social media, that kind of very much restricts, you know, what you do. So a lot of wordsmithing kind of comes out, and then choosing the right image kind of comes out. So if we kind of pare it down to like my emails, like what I try to do is summarize real quick, so then like and then have that white space, right? So then I would organize the messaging by topics,
Mhm.
you know, and then like a quick 2 or 3 sentence, you know, maybe summary, and then bullet. Like I tend to use bullets, you know, to kind of do emphasis where, you know, something that I can take out of a paragraph. And if I have action items, I actually write the words action items.
Mhm.
So, you know, so I think it's almost like an outline, right? So then like a quick, you know, what the title it is, a quick 2, 3 sentence of just giving it context, and then just bullet points as much as possible and be specific about the action items, you know, what they are, and then not a whole list, right? And then also if they're action items for specific group, then I would actually write for this group, this is your action item. If there are things that needs to be highlighted, I'll do that. Or sometimes I'll put little icons where just images that kind of relates to whatever the message, just kind of know that, you know, I'm changing topics, or just get a quick visual. Okay, this is what's going to be about.
For me, I tend to write an email and write a Blackboard announcement, and then I go back through and I keep taking out words, and I keep taking out words, and I keep taking out words. And I ask myself, do they need to know that part? Will they still understand this if I take this piece out? And I end up editing out probably 20% of what I originally wrote. I also think that there is a tactic with brief, direct communication where you need to say what you really need to say right at the beginning, and then kind of unpack the detail, so that the people that want more detail, or the people that are the kind of people who actually read the whole thing, will get what they want as they continue. But the people who are going to just scan it or just read the first few lines get what they need in the first few lines. If I'm trying to say final exam is due by midnight to students, I'll put that in the subject line, and I'll also put that as the first line I say. Final exam is due by midnight. Final exam is due by midnight. And then I'll say details about that, some things that may help them, yada, yada, yada. But if all they're getting is the first line, I've already hit my marker in that beginning. I think the same is true for faculty. Faculty read email maybe not as much as we'd like them to. I think the last statistic I read is that the average is for the emails the businesses send out, only about 11% are actually read. A lot of these emails, people maybe have an intention of reading it, or they think I'll go back and read it, or they leave it in their box thinking I'll get to it, and they don't actually read it, or they just say, I'm not going to get to that, delete. So you do have to be pretty quick.